So let's talk about European straight edge. And something that I find so fascinating is how incredible the bands, the legacy, the venues, like all of these things are. But again, if you were outside of Europe, who would really know about it? So as an example, you've got all these US bands that are sick, like totally amazing. Like Youth of Today is like, I mean, easily like one of my favorite bands of all time, hugely influential. So you can go anywhere in the world, most places in the world, and you'll find someone who knows about Youth of Today. But not the same for a band like Sportswear or Manlifting Banner or Mainstrike or Larum. So why do you think North American bands have had such kind of like a global impact where European bands, which are arguably just as good and in many cases quite a bit better, why they have only had more of kind of like a regional impact?
I think we have to blame Youth of Today and Gorilla Biscuits for that. Because when they came over to Europe in the late 80s, everything changed. And I think, in a way, people in Europe are way more open minded to any kind of music. And I'm saying this because I also lived in your part of the world for a little bit, and I knew everything about straight edge and hardcore bands in the US, but the other way around, it was maybe one band or so, and that was about it. But I really think when those two bands toured Europe for the first time, things changed for us as well.
A lot of American bands are better in performing in general. Um, Instead of, a lot of European bands get on stage and play their songs. This is not the case with the bands you just mentioned, or with Larum, Main Strike, Manlifting Banner. They really knew what they were doing. But a lot of European bands are not out there to perform. So there's a big difference, I think, in mindset or approach with a lot of North American bands that are more likely to perform and put on a show. And don't get me wrong, I really like that. I heard, if it's true, I don't know, but I heard that when Gorilla Biscuits was coming over to Europe for the first time, they had played their set for like a month and a half, two times a day, which is unheard of European bands. They might have played their set like once a month, and then probably it was on stage, and then so there's a very different approach in how to perform. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, I think America is such a big country that Europe is far away, and for most Europeans, it doesn't really matter if a band comes from Italy, if you're in the Netherlands, or a band comes from the US. It's both away. It's not a local band. So you're more open to bands from abroad or from another country because they're easily coming from another country. So that helps. And I think the political mindset of some European bands sort of scares off the general US public, especially Larum and Manlifting Banner, who are both outspoken communists. Um, well, I think that's just a step too far for most Americans to accept. So yeah, that's why I'd say. And I feel sorry for all those North Americans missing out on those great bands. They have a chance to redeem themselves.
I mean, we see the US as like one big country with different states. And when you live in Europe, like a band from Italy or a band from the US is a band from different countries. So you're going to support them, you're going to check them out. And of course, it also comes with US bands, it comes with a lot of more professionalism, of course. Yeah, that's basically it, I believe.
Well, I think like you can also go outside of just punk and hardcore and just be like, it seems like North American bands and US very specifically tend to have a little bit of a leg up in terms of like recognition or having a platform or being noticed. Where even like, let's say like a band like the Scorpions from Europe, like they're like one of the few like really big European bands that made an impact this way, where U.S. bands seem to be able to have an impact like all over the world. Very few bands from outside of the U.S. seem to have a big impact. So if we think of European bands, of course, like Refuse, Refuse was a huge one, but then I also think of like Justice did quite well over here, but I can't think of like a ton. And of course, and for anyone listening, forgive me, I'm not up on like modern European bands, so I don't want to leave anyone out. No one's being left out in a mean way. I just might not know about the band. But in my time where I was very active in punk and hardcore, there were just like a handful of European bands that made a big impact, but were like unbelievable bands. And I think of like a band like Mainstrike who came over, who like nobody really cared when they came over, but Mainstrike for me is like one of the most important bands of my life.
Don't you think it has to do with the fact that people in Europe bother about US bands and invest time and money in them getting over, and it's not the other way around?
Totally, man. I'm interested in your perspective of why that is.
Yeah, I think that's maybe one reason.
I think there's sort of a cultural liking of everything that comes from America. No matter if it's basketball or fashion, people tend to like it because it's coming from the US, or I will include Canada for that same matter. And also, I think just in especially in the record days, if you were from an American label that sold like easily 800 records in the US, and there were like 200 distributed to Europe, it would have been a big band from the US that you get your hands on the record. You're like, wow, this is a great big band from America. Well, they weren't even big at all. I remember there was this band that you loved, JP, from Toledo, Ohio, which was that Majority of One, which I think was seen as a huge band here in Europe, while in America they were like a so-so band in terms of appreciation. So there is this focus on everything that comes from America is good. What surprised me the most is that there was like way more TV coverage for the national election of Trump versus Biden than for instance in the Netherlands for the elections of the new government in Germany. And those are our neighbors. They don't get any TV attention. And then Trump versus Biden gets like hundreds of hours of TV. So they're sort of it's sort of predestined that we like America. And I don't know why it's the other way around, that you Americans don't like European bands. Because I know that a band like BGK toured the US in like 83, 84, and they left a huge impact. But it took years and years for another Dutch band to tour. I only know a handful of Dutch bands that toured. Seeing Red went a couple of times. Mainstrike did a horrible tour, which basically was the end of the band that they went to the US. It's very strange.
No, I think it has. I think it has to do with the cultural thing. It's not just hardcore music; it's everything. Like even if you read the newspapers, like or in Europe, when you pick up a newspaper or read like a news website, they cover world news. When I used to live in Chicago, it was only news from that era, unless there was like an atomic bomb exploded somewhere, and then it was covered on TV as well. I think it's more like we like to. And I don't mean this negative, but we read more about what is going on in the world, and we also are more interested in what's going on in the world. I had people in the US ask me, and this was in the mid-90s, if we in Europe, if we have highways in Europe, just like in the US. That was like a dead serious question, like things like that. So I think it's not just music, but I think it's with everything. It's maybe just like, I don't know. It's more open-minded, the right word. I don't know. It's maybe, I don't know.
And just to make that clear, JP, do we have highways in Europe?
Since the walls came down, yes. No, just kidding. But I think it goes deeper than music. I think it's with everything that maybe we are more, or we like to explore, or are just interested in what's going on, or we just want to know what is going on, and we just do not limit ourselves to where we are located. But
Yeah, but for instance, take that Main Strike tour that completely fell through. Main Strike was at the height of their popularity in Europe at that time.
yeah,
They were
absolutely.
playing like 2 to 3 to 4 shows each weekend for like thousands of people, and then they went to America. They had like 6 shitty shows for like a handful of people, which sort of illustrates the fact that there's not a lot of open-mindedness to what goes on in the rest of the world.
Totally. And let's drop a few more bands in here because I'll be remiss if I don't. So of course, Refused, Dead Stop, which I mean is like iconic beyond belief.
Yeah,
Justice, True Colors. Gosh, there's so many more that I know
yeah,
we could mention here that really made an impact. But this is why I'm so excited about your book, and again, why I want to have you on here is European hardcore has had a huge impact on me. I was very, very lucky when I was young that I had a pen pal in Europe who was into punk and hardcore. He was into what he himself referred to as no effects core, and so he would send me like stuff like Satanic Surfers and Melancholy, and we would argue through letters because we were writing letters at this point. I met this person through Maximum Rock and Roll, and he like begrudgingly would send me European hardcore, which is how I found out about Refused. He sent me like an early Refused CD, and I didn't even own a CD player at the time because it was like I was quite young, and CDs were relatively ish new, and I had to go over to my rich friend's parents' house to listen to the CD. But I remember listening to Refused and just like my mind was totally blown. Like, could
yeah,
not believe how like this was coming from Europe. Not only come from Europe, it's coming from Sweden. Like, not only coming from Sweden, it was like coming like from far up in Sweden. My mind was absolutely blown, and I got into that, and then started getting into like getting my hands on anything I could from Europe. Which, of course, then Man Lifting Banner being for me one of the hands down most like brilliant lyrics, incredible performances, good recordings, unified, interesting artwork, like a real stance on something that was like super clear. Everything was articulated well. In my mind, they were like a huge band, like a massive band in my brain, because how could something not be when it was that good? And then, of course, I'd say that as I met other kids in punk and hardcore and I started traveling in North America, people are like, I have no idea who this band is. And that led me to Main Strike. And I'd say like Main Strike for me, Strike and sportswear, because they kind of represent a sound that I'm very partial to, which is more that youth crew thing. But B, because as Marc, I believe you were saying, is like, they weren't known as like a political band, but they actually were quite political. Like I considered these bands to have this kind of perfect combination of just being so awesome at that sound, but also kind of being about something. And in that time, that sound wasn't as popular in North America, and those ideas weren't as popular in North America. They totally like really, really made a difference to me. And very specifically, if I heard No Passing Phase, like if someone put on that song, I could be doing anything. Like I tell you, I could be doing like the crappiest thing ever, and suddenly that thing, I'd be like doing it with gusto and be into it because that song, but specifically that LP, are just like I'd put that up there as being like one of the greatest hardcore LPs like of that genre of all time. But yet, like so few people know about it, and it's just like that's why your book is so important because I think it's capturing something that is so vital and so important to so many people. But as time moves on, there's more history, there's more bands, the less people know about it.
Well, let's start with Manlifting Banner here, because when Michiel and Bart started Profound, um, they basically started it after Michiel went to the USA and toured a little bit with Youth Today. So he was going like, okay, I want to have, I want to bring this clean message, but it has to be combined with politics. So when they started that band, it was not like my band's like, oh, let's go start a band, which I always did. But he was like, okay, I'm going to start a band and it's going to be this band. So he started it off with Bart, who was very much an artist in like more like the designer kind of artist and becoming that. And they needed other people for that band, and so they sort of bribed Paul and Olaf from Laram into Profound, And then when they had done Profound for a year, they thought it was too positive. It was too much geared to just straight edge, and they needed to up it in politics. So they secretly started Cold Turkey by adding Bigma, the later singer of Mainstrike, to it, and surprised all of us with the Cold Turkey 7-inch. And then they started Manifesting Banner, which was at that time they were straight edge and they were communists at the time that the wall fell. It was the year that the wall fell in '89 in Berlin, and they came out like, with all these communist ideas how to make it a better world. It's not the end of history, it's the start of history. We have to do it better now. Unfortunately, quite the opposite happened. Um, but they were, as a band, they were so contrived in a positive way that they made their shows, their artwork, their message, their songs, all in that format of a political straight edge band, or maybe I should say a political band that was also straight edge. Um, and that really hit something with all like the left wing people in Europe that felt a little bit lost after the wall came down, and what's going to happen now, and are we going to be submitted to unbridled capitalism? Uh, so they made sort of a foundation for all of us in how good you could be as a band, in your message, but also in your artwork. I think we paid a lot of attention to Bart's artwork in our book, um, because of the fact we think that what he accomplished in style, in combining the message with the aesthetics, was really groundbreaking. Um, and they were a hugely controversial band. I mean, they were banned at shows. There were people talking about Bigma's Hare Krishna influences. I think some of their boxes with records were sent back from the US to Europe as being communist propaganda. So all the controversy you could have with a punk rock band, they had that again, 12, 13, 14 years after punk rock started. Uh, so yeah, coming back to your question, how come that nobody in the US or North America knew about that band? For me, that's sort of unbelievable because everyone in Europe knew that band, either because you liked them or because you hated them. You
Yeah.
would have gone to see that band because you had to see and listen to that band. And I think at that time, because of them, the whole stall thing happened at shows, that people would put up stalls in the venue and get all these political books, pamphlets, leaflets there, and that sort of grew further into the '90s. It's something that I really always liked about our scene, but unfortunately we couldn't find a lot of pictures of like the after show stalls and booths that were at the shows. We put quite some that we found in our book, and I think that Main Strike, because Bigma used to be the guitar player of Man Lifting Banner, um, had a great example in Man Lifting Banner how to do things correctly. So he had like a sort of a starting point, or as we would say, a spring plank, where you jump the high board you jump off in the pool, um, to put together the band with the right amount of energy, the right amount of message, the right amount of so-called artistry, to take it to a next level. And the good thing about Bigma was that he said, like, I want to take a step back in music. I don't want to progress into the metallic side of hardcore, which everyone is doing. I'm going to do a step back and take that 88, 89 approach of old school hardcore and put that in Main Strike. And I think that was also something we were longing for in Europe. Get away from the metal bullshit and go back to straightforward, clean hardcore.
That's what Bigma always wanted to do. I mean, going back to your question, Aram, when I was heavily into bands like Youth of the Day and Gorilla Biscuits, just like everybody else. But when Man Lifting Banner started playing, I was like, yes, this is the European answer to these bands. Where this band captures it all. They're straight edge. They look like straight edge kids. They cover political issues, and all of the shows, like in my memories, all of the shows were amazing. And being the last show they ever played in Germany, in Salzgitter, that was the best show, their best show. But I mean, they headlined the show over a US band. I don't even remember which band it was. But man, that show, it was insane. And so I saw a lot of other shows for Man Lifting Banner in Belgium, in the Fortin Vis, for example, which basically was like the European CBGBs. Crazy. And Bigma never was into all the political message, was not into the political side of Man Lifting Banner, and he always wanted to play in a youth crew band, always, from the start, from the get-go. Then that was his only thing.
And it's also good to stress that although Man Lifting Banner was a political band, there was a lot of debate within the band if they were like Leninists or Trotskyists or Marxists, and they had all these fights in the van on which dialect of communism they were speaking. And
Yeah.
I remember Bigma was just going like, "What the hell?"
Or how
Dude,
can you be
that's hilarious.
how can you be into Trotsky and eat meat or hunt?
Yeah. Dude, the whole thing is so it's very meaningful for me that you guys have done this great book. And I know it might be weird that like me living in Canada, like it matters so much to me. I've been so appreciative of being able to tour Europe the amount of times I've had, and playing with these bands and getting to know all these people and these venues that are there that they're gone, and nobody knows about them. There's just something about the impermanence of it, and just having an opportunity to like really interact with it, and then also having my life change so much by it that you know when I found out about the book and what you did, I knew I had to talk to you both about it. And there's so much more we could talk about here, because I just think it's such a fascinating topic of the impermanence of things and the importance of documenting it, but also like not getting too stuck in the past, because there's this modern scene going on. There's a lot more we could talk about, but I do want to move us towards the end of the interview, and I want to hit on a couple things here. So, JP, I know you have a history in zines and all of this, but Marc, you'd never previously done any kind of like publications before, right?
Well, for my work, I have to write a lot, so I'm very used to writing, and so the first version of this book was my real first book as well. I wrote a book in between about I had critical illness. I was in the ICU for quite a while, so I wrote a book on that, which was also, by the way, designed by JP. So thank you for that, JP. Um, and I think of myself as being a pretty good writer, um, but in this book I was sort of limited in like two ways. First of all, I really wanted to pay tribute to the people that we spoke to, but also I want to have it accessible for people that are all over Europe and maybe not as fluent as in English as we are. So I had to limit myself in how to write it down, and also what I found really important was I wanted to have a story that went from A to Z, and I didn't want to have a book with just quotes. I wanted to have a story, and I wanted to have the reader be the judge of what happened, because there are some controversial parts in the book, um, and I'm not a journalist and I'm not a scientist, so I will never know what if it would be A or B or C in the controversy. So hopefully I wrote it that way, that the reader will make their own judgment. And thirdly, I really appreciate you in having the time to read our book and give me back those compliments on that time, because that's basically all that matters to me, is that people that read it will get like a little glimpse of warmth in their heart, like, oh yeah, this is how it was, and it will never be that again, but I was there and I experienced it and I recognize it. So, but coming back to your question, this is my first real 500 plus pages book that I published.
All right. So my question for both of you and JP, I'd also love to hear your just thoughts from like design and all that kind of stuff. For someone who's listening to this and is like, oh, you know what? I've got a story that I think needs to be told, or there's this thing that needs to be documented. Not everybody has a platform that Discord has created for itself. You know, it's not like they were given it. And that's why I think one of those amazing punk and hardcore stories where it's just like a bunch of people who are like, no, this needs to exist. We're going to make it exist. And of course, they've been able to like kind of grow with that over time. But not everyone has that platform. And a lot of people are like, I think this story matters and I want to make it happen. So any advice that either one of you could give anyone listening to this who would be interested in taking on a project that might have some kind of similar scale here?
Don't do it alone. It was so worthwhile that we did this with the two of us. I think a threesome would have been too much, but with the two of us, um, we really had arguments on what to do and how to do it. And of course, we had similar, but a similar background, but very different capabilities. I could. I'm more of a writer, and JP is of course a designer, so we were complementary on each other in that aspect. And so the first advice, don't do it alone, and the second advice is just do it. Go ahead, do it. If you think it's important, go do it. In our case, it's been a long road. We've been busy with this for 19 years. The first 2 years in 2005, 2006. Then we just debated back and forth to 2019, and then we put the turbo on it for the last 4 years. And it took over our lives. I mean, I gotta be honest with that. I mean, the last couple of years were just like every spare minute I had, we spent on the book, and it's the same with JP. And um, especially getting the story right. I think we rewrote it like 3 or 4 times because someone said like, oh, you have to turn it around, and then I turned it around, and then I was like, no, then I had to turn it back, and of course I didn't save the first ID, so I had to like, it was just horrible. It was just horrible, but yeah, just do it. It's so rewarding. I mean, it was so good going to the printer and getting the first preprint. I remember JP and I were just flipping over the loose pages and like, what, this is going to be amazing. And then there were like 1,000 copies of this huge book. Oh yeah, and please remember, if you make 1,000 LPs, that's in real estate, that's doable. But if you make 1,000 of these books in real estate, it's horrible. It takes up your corridor, it takes up your living room, it takes up your. It's just, it's insane how much square footage that is.
JP, what are your thoughts?
I don't even know where to start. No, but it's basically like with everything that, I mean, we come out of a scene where we do it all ourselves. So if you have an idea or if you want to do something, just start it and don't tell anyone. But as soon as you start evolving or get into the project or things start shaping up, spread the word and go for it. That would basically be it. That's how I do everything, actually. I mean, have an idea, work it out, sketch it out, and start working on it.
All right. Are you two ready for the crucial three?
Well, the what I want to say is, no,
Marc,
we're not ready.
You keep your mouth shut now.
Well,
Now it's
yeah,
my
but
turn.
I mean, I want to stress that I really appreciate that it struck a chord with you. I mean, you toured the world, you went to our neck of the woods, and the book struck a chord with you. I really, I love that. Thank you so much. And the other thing is, if you want to do something outrageous like we did, and you know that it's not going to destroy your personal funding, because this was the most expensive thing I've ever done besides buying a house. Um, just do it, go for it. I mean, the reward is amazing. It's just
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, if you do so, if you start working on a project like this, you also start to believe in it. And of course, it comes with some risks. But once you get more and more into the project and you see like the first mock-ups and the results from the printer, you're like, all right, this is going to be good. And yeah,
so remember, kids, just do it. So hit us with
exactly.
the crucial three. Hit us with the crucial three.
All right, here we go. So I'm going to ask it, but I'm going to ask that each one of you answer. So whoever wants to go first. All right, so let's start with an easy one. We talked earlier about the unheard music, and that box of demos that most punks have somewhere of these like unheard bands that only very few people know about. So for each one of you, what's a band that you have in your heart that you're like, this band was unreal, but nobody knows about them?
Ultimate Sabotage is my pick, and that's it's a band, an old punk band from an old friend, like an old friend of mine. His sister sung in his band, and I was staying at his house, and his parents were gone, and they threw a party, and that band was playing, and I was like maybe like 12 or 13 years old, and that was my introduction to punk. And like all these punks from the big city came to the countryside, and it was at a farm. It was mind blowing. But that's the first band that comes up in my mind.
Ultimate Sabotage. Where were they
Ultimate.
from?
They are from a place called Nijmegen, which is close to Arnhem, where the Goudvishal was. Maybe you played the Goudvishal with one of the bands. Yep. I believe a Champion, right?
Yep.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And that city is 50 minutes away. It's like a student city, and like like at that time, like those kids were a lot older than me. So it was like, for me, it was all kids playing punk music, and what is this? It was like my first proper introduction to punks and squats, and and with a female singer, Ultimate Sabotage. And later I found out they played with bands like Die Negatione, and like big bands, like big punk bands that came over and toured Europe.
Heck yeah. All right. Marc.
I have two. One of them is Kikkerspuug, which is a Dutch band who released a demo before they released their album. And they're a little bit known because of their album, but their demo is so much better than the album. It's just insane. The lyrics are funny. They're political. The music is good. I think they took like 5 years doing the demo, and then they did a great demo, and then they did the album in like a couple of months, and it was just horrible songwriting. So I think the Kikkerspuug demo is amazing. And then there was this band called Oigasm, which was a partial punk band and a partial skinhead band. There were two punks with mohawks and two skinheads in the band. And they came from a hick town in the Netherlands called Nunspeet, which is like a teeny tiny little nothing. Uh, and since I was from a little scene at that time, and we were always like debating, are we more skinhead or are we more punk? And we never were able to choose. And then we just thought it was amazing to have a band that had two skinheads and two punks in one band, and they were even called Oigasm. What a freaking cool name!
Perfect answer, guys. For me, it would be a band from Edmonton, Alberta, which is the town that SNFU came from. It was just north of Calgary, called Blindside. And they were the first straight edge band I ever saw. It was in the 90s. I think I saw them in 93. And I'd loved straight edge bands before that, but it was the first one I actually ever saw. We played with them in Calgary, my first punk band, and they blew me away. Their singer was this big, tall skinhead named Anton. He's wearing Doc Martens and a flight jacket when they played, and had an X on his hand. And my mind was, they had, I believe, 3 demos, and I have 2 of them, the second and the third. And are they great demos? I mean, in the landscape of punk and hardcore, probably not. But did they make a humongous impact on me as a kid? absolutely. And I still listen to them. I still think about them. Like so much of my story is like tied up with being like totally blown away by this band. And like it's just so funny. It's so funny how these guys that's like it's just some punk band that they were probably in when they're young. For me, it's like, whoa, Blindside, it was a big deal. All right, let's go to question number 2. Let's think about your careers now. That do-it-yourself part of punk and hardcore, which I know is so important to both of you. What's the biggest impact it's had on your career?
It became my career. I mean, I'm still doing it myself, just like you. I have my own business. I'm running my own business. So yeah, it shaped me, and I also noticed when I was still working for huge international agencies and smaller agencies, where you are only limited to walk a certain path, that you want to do everything. And that's something that I took basically from the punk and hardcore scene, that you just do everything yourself to create something. And that's that's exactly the reason why I also stopped working for advertising agencies, because I want to do it all myself. So yeah, it's really simple, but that's it basically.
Yeah, my career is built on do-it-yourself. Although I've been a civil servant for most of my professional career, and I'm now in a position that it's too hard for me to do everything myself, I still see that if you question everything and the answer is you're not agreeing on what you're seeing, you have to change it yourself. And I'm now in a position to put other people onto the path of change. So yeah, that's basically what I do every day. And it definitely got me to where I am right now. Also, I have my hands tattooed, which are usually um, are told that this is a job stopper. But I'm the director of a big city in the Netherlands. As long as you stick to your own values and who you are, tattooed hands are not a job stopper. Well, in most cases. And yeah, the whole DIY approach got me to where I am today, and I'm living with that every day, and I'm questioning myself for that every day as well. Why aren't I am doing it myself? I have to put that question in front of myself every day because society demands something better than it is today. It needs something better than it is today, and I'm trying to contribute to that.
Heck yeah. All right, final question for both of you, and it's a tougher one. So your book has a lot to do with legacy, and not directly, but like that idea of legacy, and it's like a communal legacy, a community legacy. It's something that people, even without knowing it, came together to create over years and years and years, and decades and time, and from the individual to the band to the cities to the countries, legacy. And it really makes me think a lot about what we want our legacy to be. So this doesn't have to be punk or hardcore related at all. But if you were to say, it's wherever you want to go with it, but for each of you, what would you like your legacy to be? So when you kind of hang up your boots and you go on to whatever's next afterwards, after we live, what do you want your legacy to be?
Oh man. Well,
I told you it was hard.
we have the book, of course. We have the book, so that's a brick-sized legacy. Uh,
Mm.
but I mean, for me, in generically speaking, it has to be my children. It's I hope they. I mean, my children grew up with touring bands coming over to stay, with veganism as being normal. So I hope they take on a little bit of what they learned about about punk rock, about society from their punk rock dad. And my two children, they're 26 and 22 now. They're both like totally not into punk rock. Um, but I know I was with my daughter, with my oldest one. I was visiting a klezmer a concert of a klezmer band. You know klezmer in the Jewish music, and they were playing like really poorly. And my daughter was like 12 at the time, and she was sitting next to me and said, "Dad, your punk rock isn't that bad." So I thought there was a little bit of a recognition there. So yeah, the more common answer would be like, I hope I put a positive influence into my children, and that they take that further into society, and hopefully we contribute a little bit to a better society. If I look at veganism today, when we turned vegan in late 80s, early 90s, I could have never thought that veganism would be such a big thing nowadays. So hopefully we turned a couple of switches into something more sustainable.
Yeah, this is absolutely not hardcore related, but for me, it's also like I hope my morals and values, that my kids and my family, learn from it, and yeah, take something from it. If it's either from veganism or from just doing things yourself, or just getting things done and do things you love. That's the most important thing. And just be positive to everything and everybody in your surroundings. That's basically it.
Heck yeah. Awesome, man. Great answers. All right, guys, we made it through. Anything that you want to shout out, anything you want to mention, anything you want to ask me as we're closing off?
Now, I want to thank you, Aram, because I mean, it's not very often that people from the other side of the pond show so much interest in European hardcore, and that's really cool. Also to get not the recognition, but like that you appreciate it, and I think I mean that's basically what you do this for, and I really like that.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe taking it a little bit further. What did you like the best about our book?
When you're over here, you don't get the backstory, man. So like I give you an example, like Aram, like there's this local dude in Vancouver. It's the first guy that I even had heard about Aram from ever. And he's kind of like, like a guy that is like, he's the kind of guy that would know about like first wave Japanese hardcore. He'd know about first wave European straight edge, like just a guy who was like a real record collector and real entrenched and stuff like that. And he was like, "Oh, you like this band? You like Manlifting Banner? Well, you got to check out this band." And there wasn't like a way of getting that history before. And when that that book, what was the straight edge book that Rev put out? Gosh, what was
All
it called?
ages.
Yeah, All Ages. When that came out, it was like finally someone's written a book about it. And whether you think that's a good book or a bad book, it was an important book because it kind of started that focus. So what I liked was just being able to get like real deal history on stuff that there's no way of knowing about unless you were there. And that to me was like real interesting because they could do like more of a connect the dots than before. It was just kind of like get a story from someone here, get a story from someone there. And then also like I know I've talked quite a bit about Mainstrike in the podcast here, but it's like Mainstrike like really like legit mattered to me. Like no, if you look at Promises Kept and you look at No Passing Phase, it's like that's intentional. It's like to me it's like like an homage to them.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of that like a band is so important that so few people know about outside of Europe. I just appreciated so deeply that you guys are giving a voice to a history that really it's kind of like this unknown history, even now in Europe as time has passed on. So that's really what stood out to me about it. And, like deep gratitude for me for putting out the book. I think it's so cool for all of your, all the things that both of you have done over the years and for being on the podcast. I've had so much fun with both of you.
Thank you so much, Aram.
Thank you.
Heck yeah. All right, everybody, make sure you check out the book and check out Birds of a Feather, which is a very, very, very cool band. And also like check out all the bands that we talked about today, because not only are they cool bands, but they've really made a difference and still make a difference today. With that, we're out. See you next time. One Step Beyond.